Watch this.
More money, more money, more money means more time spent at the State House for Idaho lawmakers. They've been given strict guidance to address taxes, education, and inflation in Idaho. The question is whether they will stick with it. School districts have been asking for money for years. When they can't get it from the state, they ask for it from their neighbors in the form of bonds and levies. But lately, several haven't been able to get that. We check in with 2 Canyon County districts dealing with it again. Maybe you have a collection of love letters stashed in a box somewhere, probably top of the closet, a memento of days gone by. Well, the days of letter writing certainly have gone by. But one holiday is hoping to change that. The hope is to do in one day something lawmakers haven't been able to do in decades at the State House. If all goes according to plan for Thursday's special session of the Idaho legislature, they will send significant funds to education in Idaho and drop the income tax rate below 6% for everyone. Oh, and for good measure, they want to remit a refund to taxpayers, something they've actually done twice in the last 12 months, so this would be the 3rd time. Just in time for a general election. Heading into tomorrow, there is a lot of support among lawmakers to vote yes on Governor Little's wish list. Not that there aren't always a few monkeys willing to throw a wrench or two into the works. There's also something to be said about what lawmakers show up to vote on this proposal, since several of them lost their primary election in May but are technically serving through the end of the year. Here's Chief Political Reporter Joe Paris with a preview to break it all down.
Get the coffee ready. It's going to be an early morning at the Idaho State House Thursday. Lawmakers are set to meet for a special, extraordinary session.
Of course, the last time we had a special session, we ended up with a near riot in the Capitol.
Dr. Stephanie Witt is an Idaho politics expert and professor of political science at Boise State. She says the coordination of a long list of legislative co-sponsors on the governor's proposed wish list is telling. The proposed legislation heading into tomorrow includes tax cuts, tax rebates, and education investments, all in the name of addressing inflation.
That, to me, indicates there's a lot of work in the background before they came forward with the special session to make sure they had a lot of agreement on the idea of going into session and general agreement about what they were going to look at.
However, Dr. Witt expects pushback from Republicans who have spoken out against pushing more tax dollars to Idaho public education.
I expect that the opposition that there is will be quite passionate. We've seen the education budgets be held up by members in the House in particular over the last several cycles.
My back of the envelope math is that this moves us from 51st in America in education funding to 49th. So it's not like we should be doing, giant dances in the streets.
House Minority Leader, Democrat Representative Alana Rubel says the proposed $410 million investment into public education is a good start at addressing a lack of education funding in Idaho.
It's a step in the right direction. I'd rather be 49th than 51st, but it leaves a lot of problems unsolved. We are still going to have a heck of a time retaining and recruiting teachers, and this does absolutely nothing for the actual physical facilities, which are a whole other standalone crisis, requiring over $800 million just to get our schools into adequate condition around the state.
Rubel and other Democrats are concerned about the possibility that the proposal going into the day on Thursday will be significantly changed throughout the course of action.
I'm already hearing rumors that there is mischief afoot to monkey with the education funding piece. And so I am concerned. I'm a sponsor on the bill as it's written, but if they start messing around with it too much, my concerns could start to outweigh my enthusiasm.
What's not to like about a rebate check? What's not to like about an overall tax decrease and a commitment to our education system?
House Speaker, Republican Representative Scott Bedke, is optimistic about getting crucial business done.
It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on or which party or which section of the party you represent. Everybody wants their kids well educated, their grandkids well educated. Everyone knows that that's where the magic happens, is getting the kids educated.
The legislative body that is set to work Thursday is basically the same group that adjourned earlier this year. A major difference, there are now several Idaho lawmakers that lost their primary election and know they won't be back in January. This creates questions about accountability while voting.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm not overly concerned. We'll see the legislative process at work here. And so motions to amend or to move to the amending order are in order. and we'll just have to see what the majority of the body wants to do.
There are a lot of legislators in there who are probably never going to be standing before election again. And, for better or worse, there's arguably a lesser degree of accountability in the timing there.
So, will lawmakers stay close to what Governor Little proposed, or will final votes be on legislation with significant changes?
This could all be a big illusion. There's $330 million in education funding that's going to be earmarked from sales tax proceeds. There is nothing to say that the legislature can't come in next session and deduct that very same amount out of the regular budget that they would allocate from general funds.
What does success look like for you at the end of the week? Success
looks like by 8 p.m. tomorrow, we're done. I don't know. It's impossible to predict every twist and turn, but I think that we can do this in one day. That's certainly our goal.
And they'll start tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning over at the Idaho State House. I've seen a lot of questions today from people wondering what's going to happen tomorrow. We really don't know, and I can tell you, Brian, even within the last half hour here, at least one lawmaker has sent us an email that says, hey, we have our own idea that we are bringing to the State House tomorrow. So I want to be very clear here. What the governor recommended in this legislation that they're bringing into the date tomorrow, that doesn't have to be what they talk about or vote on. Now, they have to stay in the narrow focus of inflation and tax cuts and stuff like that.
Sure.
But we could see a wild day tomorrow if it goes that way.
If several others bring their wrenches, it could all happen. We'll see. All right, thank you very much, Joe. All right, former lawmaker and now convicted rapist Aaron Von Ehlinger is going to spend at least the next 8 years in prison. Today, the judge sentenced Von Ehlinger to 20 years for his felony rape conviction, with 8 of those years fixed, meaning he could ask for parole after 8 years. Judge Michael Reardon made that determination after the court heard a pre-recorded statement read by the victim, Jane Doe. She was unable to testify during the trial. She walked off the stand after only a few questions, saying it was too difficult to continue. So this was the first time we have heard from her since she was made to testify before a House Ethics Committee in April of 2021, a hearing after which Von Ehlinger resigned as a lawmaker. We have chosen to not share Jane Doe's reading of that victim impact statement, but we will share what she said. And she said this: most people feel empowered being able to go to court and confront the assailant who brought them there. Truth be told, I have never felt more ashamed, belittled, powerless, and dehumanized. Referring to the day of the assault, that would be March 9th, 2021, she went on to say, he felt so entitled to my body, he used me as a means to satisfy his deviant sexual desires. I will never forget the force and strength of his grip. Even after I repeated, I don't want to, again, he just did not move. I am here, scared, she said. I am here frightened. I am so petrified, but I will not be intimidated into complacent silence so yet another rapist can slip through the cracks of this justice system. And to conclude, Jane Doe went on, I hope he rots in pieces behind those cold metal bars. Von Ehlinger did get up and did give a statement of his own to the judge. He mentioned his military service, his pilgrimage to Israel over the previous years, and being baptized in the Jordan River as to why he's not the man the victim and the state of Idaho says he is. The judge wasn't buying it.
As I listened to you today, I wrote down 2 words: victim and hero. That you see yourself as a victim and you see yourself as a hero. And frankly, I don't see you as either one of those things.
Judge Reardon said Von Ehlinger demonstrated a lack of empathy during the trial, and he's yet to apologize. The judge so therefore sentenced Von Ehlinger to those 20 years in prison with a chance of parole after 8. He'll also have to pay a $5,000 fine, and he will not be allowed to have contact with the victim, Jane Doe, until 2055. All right, several school districts have seen their attempts to help fund education, fail. The latest coming last night. In Middleton, it's been very difficult to pass any education-related funding solutions in the last 5 years. They did pass a levy back in 2017. Then in 2018, they tried 3 separate times to pass a $28.8 million bond in March, in August, and November. In November, they tried to break that up a bit into 3 separate measures. It still failed. March of this year, voters approved a 2-year, $1.5 million levy, and the latest coming yesterday with the $59 million bond failing by more than 12%. Meanwhile, in Caldwell, Valley View School District, they've had some success in the last 4 years, but by the slimmest of margins. In 2017, their 10-year, $2 million per year levy passed by 4 votes, just 4 votes. In 2019, their $65 million bond passed by just one vote. Well, that money went to pay for a new middle school and set aside money to buy land for future school sites. Then in 2020, there was a 2-year, $4.5 million levy per year passed. But this year, both attempts to pass bonds failed. Once in March by just 2% of the votes, and then again yesterday by less than 1%. So you can see schools are asking for money a lot of times. Sometimes they're getting it, not so much other times. Because when the population grows around the area, of course, so do the needs of the schools. And the education needs statewide are already documented. Local education nonprofit Bloom concluded Idaho needs to build more than 100 schools by the year 2030. But if we're already saying no to new schools now, where does that leave us in 10 years or less than 10 years from now? Here's Andrew Bartline.
New subdivisions keep popping up.
There's thousands of homes that are on deck to be constructed in the upcoming years. That's going to bring a lot of families in.
But the schools remain the same size.
We wanted to meet the needs of our teachers and our students.
Valley View School District spokesperson Joey Palmer says his district needs help.
The growth isn't going to stop.
Because for the second time this year, Valley View voters denied a $55 million bond. The bond would have allowed the district to build 2 new elementary schools and buy land for another high school.
We got closer to meeting that threshold for the supermajority to pass it, but we didn't quite make it over the hump.
As a result, Valley View will continue to run 6 of 7 elementary schools over capacity. And this isn't unique, according to Terry Ryan.
School districts that are bursting at the seams.
Ryan is the CEO of Bloom, an Idaho nonprofit focusing on education and finding solutions.
If you've got overcrowded classroom, that affects the ability of teachers to be successful and schools to be successful.
Bloom conducted a study at the beginning of 2022 to project education needs across the state. Ryan's team concluded Idaho schools would need to accommodate more than 40,000 new students by 2030. And there's only one way to get it done.
I think there's tough conversations that could be had around that, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to build buildings.
Bloom estimates 104 new schools are needed, but already taxpayers are denying these projects.
It only gets more expensive and the need only becomes greater. So every time the bond fails, it just exasperates everything more and more.
Valley View built portable classrooms on existing school property in an effort to keep up, but they've run out of room to build more.
If you've ever been in those, I mean, they can work. In the winter, it's a drag going from the main building to the portable classroom. I think it's disruptive and seeing it, on an ongoing basis.
Portables have become one of Valley View's only options because the district can't build new schools without a bond, and land developers don't pay an impact fee when their project moves thousands of people into the district. It's left Valley View literally begging for money.
Currently, I meet with developers to see if they'd be willing to donate to the Valley View School District if a city council approves their development. Because to be quite frank with you, most developers say, no, we don't have to pay you a dime, and they still get approved by city councils.
Palmer says school districts need more funding from the state legislature. And Idaho lawmakers are aware of this need headed into the special legislative session.
Inflation is eroding the buying power also in our schools. And there's wage inflation, et cetera. And so in order to have a good set of schools, we've got to continually invest back in them.
Without more money from the state, without impact fees, and without bonds, growing school districts have their hands tied.
We just need to regroup and see if we can find out how we can meet the needs of our kids, retain the teachers that we have so that way we're not overworking them with a ridiculous student to teacher ratio in the classrooms. So we'll figure something out.
Ryan says another solution could be compromising on the ask. Instead of a $55 million bond, districts could ask for a $40 million bond. Build a school with a smaller gym, no football field, especially keep it bare minimum with amenities. And that's kind of a strategy that they've seen work with charter schools. That's what Bloom does a lot of work with, is with charters. They say building bare minimum schools, sometimes you just need the facility. Also says they haven't found a correlation between the quality of the facility and the performance of students. If there's a good teacher in the classroom and the kids are there, they have the materials they need, typically it works out all right.
And I know money for schools and levies and bonds, nothing new in the state of Idaho, but over the last couple of years with the focus being on CRT and indoctrination of children, when these teachers and administrators are more worried about whether or not these classrooms are bursting at the seams, that should be the focus of what our education system looks like right now, I guess.
Yeah. All right. And it's a tough break for a lot of schools, too, some overflowing by more than 200 kids.
And still seeing the need for repairs like air conditioners and just improved buildings overall. All right, thank you very much, Andrew. When was the last time you wrote a letter to someone? Not an email, not an extra long text message, but an actual handwritten letter. Well, tomorrow seems like a good day to do it, because tomorrow, September 1st, is World Letter Writing Day, a day meant to encourage people to pick up a pen or pencil and, well, write a letter. It's a holiday created by an Australian named Richard Simpkin in 2014, and it's fitting that one of the newest holidays celebrates something so old that we had to learn about it from Idaho's Historical Society.
All right, come on in.
With recess wrapped up, Mrs. Griffin is getting her kindergarten students
Okay, oh man.
settled in.
All right, what is one of our centers that we're going to do today?
Technology may be the state-of-the-art form of teaching these days, but in this second week of school, Mrs. Griffin's kids will also be going old school, learning the first letter of the alphabet.
Show me what alligator says.
And how to write it
Start at the top and you go down the slide.
by hand.
And then you have to pick it back up. So then in kindergarten, we learn correct letter formation. And then you're going to go down this slide.
Mrs. Griffin is helping to build a foundation
And then I'm going to cross in the middle.
for what she calls a lifetime skill.
We're really taking our time because we're learning how to make our letters. It's a skill you should have before you move on to first grade.
But is it a skill these students will use much past the 9th grade?
Not so much.
But that won't stop Mrs. Griffin in her quixotic quest.
I mean, I understand that there's a lot of electronic communication and texting and emailing and things like that, but I would imagine you still write almost every day.
But actual writing, putting pen to paper or to plastic, might in these modern times be a form of art seen as slightly more archaic.
We have thousands of letters written by Idahoans to Idahoans, historical ones, official ones.
Which is why Idaho's Historical Society archives is a good place to find them.
So this one is from 1896. February 1896. It starts out with, my dearest Miss Kate, and it's a letter to her friend.
Elizabeth Westernberg likes how letters
Just a letter to her friend in Lapaway.
add a personal touch to a snapshot of history.
I think they're like diaries in that way because you're seeing someone's personal written message to another person. Like this one was written to the wife of this Patrick Collins who passed away.
Patrick Collins was a soldier assigned to Fort Boise who one day in 1879, while dressed in full regalia, was out riding his horse. His long cape caught on a fence, and he was thrown to the ground, and he hit his head. The major survived the Civil War, but couldn't survive a major wardrobe malfunction. Thus, the letter to his wife.
Death of your husband has thrown a gloom over our regiment. So I just like that sentence because I was like, oh, it shows that he's respecting the wife, he's writing this letter, and it's actually impacted them as well. And this was from Clarence Darrow.
There are simple telegrams
to Bora to let him know, like, hey, the train's running late, please push the case out. And I think example of like that would be a text message now. But he had to go to a telegraph office, pay per word to get that message sent on.
And correspondence.
Dear Miss Kate.
A bit more confusing.
I cannot something literally with historic John. Yeah, I cannot.
And if you thought the front page was hard to figure, wait till you see how it's written on the back.
You only had what you could work with. And it appears this woman only had one piece of paper to work with.
That's what it looks like. Yeah, she wrote it fine on the front and then on the back decided to go across and then up and down as well to fill in, and I cannot read it, so.
But even Elizabeth, as much as she likes letters, hasn't written one herself in years.
When did you stop, like, that being your primary?
Probably junior high, like.
So with World Letter Writing Day upon us, Elizabeth may not play along.
I think the length of time to get somebody a letter is like, do I really want to wait that many days? I can, like.
True.
Capital A, Rowan.
But Mrs. Griffin likely will.
I wrote a thank you letter just last week. I did.
And continue to hand that art form to her students.
You know, a little text to say thanks just isn't quite as meaningful as a handwritten letter.
It's really not. That's why we keep those boxes of letters, right? Idaho State Historical Society is celebrating World Letter Writing Day tomorrow by showcasing some of those letters that you shared today. They have lots more of them, as you heard. Stop by the archive building on Old Penitentiary Road between 12 and 4 in the afternoon to read some of those letters and maybe write one yourself. They'll even mail it for you, stamp included. That's the little square sticker that you're supposed to put on the right-hand corner of the envelope, in case you don't know. All right, a lot of messages today about the special session tomorrow and education funding in Idaho, like this one from Steve, who says, I find it interesting after Mr. Bedke said everyone in Idaho wants to give Idaho kids a good education. We hear how a minority of voters in Middleton and Valley View districts are able to refuse a good education situation for our kids. A good lesson on how a minority of selfish voters have put Idaho's education in last place in the nation for years. Portables are the most misnamed things in education, says Rod in Boise. They should be called permanents because once they're on campus, they never get moved off. That probably is no truer statement said. I find it amusing. Boise Hot Air Balloon Festival started at the same time the legislators are back in town, says Rod. That's a pretty good one. I'm retired. I'm on a fixed income. I don't mind the potential to have dollars flow my way from the state of Idaho. But this is pretty much a major one-time opportunity for Idaho. This is from Lewis and Eagle, by the way. Spend the money, he says. Spend it on the state, on our citizens. Fix our schools. Don't try to buy votes. Buy our future. We'll see you tomorrow. See what they do tomorrow.